Okay, so we are on 41b. I don't know if you got a chance to see the beginning of the parak of the new chapter, so I'm going to just introduce it. And then tomorrow, Bez Hashem, we'll have a makeup shir for the daf that 41, which is missing. Today's daf is 42, and is the one we're going to do. And 41 we'll do a makeup tomorrow afternoon. So the Mishnah, we're talking about the Eruv for traveling outside of a city. We know that the halacha is you can only walk outside of your city 2,000 amma, approximately 3,000 feet, half a mile roughly. Okay, so if you need to go beyond that for a mitzvah, something you can make an eruv. The halacha that we're going to see is what happens if somebody by mistake or was by force was taken outside beyond the 2,000 amma. There are two important halachas that we have to know relevant to this. One halacha is that the city that you are in counts as 4 amos. So Portland, even though it's an enormous city, but the entire city counts as 4 amos, and I can walk from one end of the city to the other, even though it's way past 2,000 amma, because it all counts as my space, because at the onset of Shabbos, this is where I was. But that's only for the city that I was in at the onset of Shabbos. That's halacha 1. Halacha number 2 that we're going to learn, important for here is that once you go beyond the 2,000 amma outside of your city, so you're beyond the space, it's called the Tchum Shabbos, you're beyond your Tchum Shabbos, you're not allowed to go anywhere 4 amos. That's it. You can only walk 6 feet around yourself, and that's it. You have to remain where you are. So the Mishnah said if somebody was forced by gunpoint by someone outside of 2,000 amma, the halacha is that he can only walk over there 6 feet, 4 amos, and that's it. And the Mishnah had a similar case with Rabbi Gamliel, and they were on a boat, and the question was, the boat was moving on Shabbos, fine, but then you can't travel, you can't walk around on the boat itself because you have to remain in your 6 feet. And Rabbi Gamliel says, no, the entire boat counts as 4 amos, 6 feet space. And the Gemara was dealing with if somebody came back into the city if he had no right to come in, he was forced back in, he was brought back in, what the halachas are. Here we're going to get into the halachas. What about produce? The halacha of Tchum Shabbos applies not only to use yourself, but your items as well. Where you are or where your items are for the onset of Shabbos, they become the place for Shabbos, and they can't move. They can't be brought outside of the Tchum somewhere else. And if they are, they may not be allowed to have benefit from. So we're at the bottom of 41b. Esev Rav Yosef bar Shammai l'Rav Papa. The Rav Yosef bar Shammai asked Rav Papa, Rabbi Nechemi and Rabbi Eliezer Yaakov Omrim, sorry, I skipped line. Amar Rav Papa, 4 lines from the bottom. Amar Rav Papa said, Peiros sheyotza chutz l'tchum, produce that were taken out of the place where they were for Shabbos. So they started off in Village A, and they were taken 2,000 amas out of that place, v'chazru, and then they were brought back in. Afilu b'mezid, even if it was done intentionally, lo hifsidu as mechamin, they didn't lose their place. Because they obviously didn't choose to go out, they were forced out, forced back in, and therefore you're allowed to benefit. You're allowed to benefit from the produce in this city. My timer, what's the reason? And Nusin Ninu, they obviously didn't choose to do this. They were taken in and brought out. So Rav Yosef bar Shammai asked Rav Papa, who had just said this halacha, the produce outside of their original onset, taken outside of their original Shabbos space, and then brought back in, are still allowed to be used. What about the halacha of Rabbi Nechemi and Rabbi Eliezer bar Yaakov? Oh, I don't know what that was. No. Is that light's working?
That's happening here by me.
It's happening by you too?
No, not by me.
Not by you. Whoa. I'm having this electrical short.
Some are going out, some aren't.
I don't know what that is. Okay. All right. So Esever Rav Yosef Bar Shammai Rav Papa. So Rav Yosef Bar Shammai asked Rav Papa. Rabbi Nechemi, Rabbi Lezer, Yaakov Omer Lo Olam Asurim Ad Sheyachzeru L'Mkomen. That produce are always prohibited once they were taken outside of their space. So now they're only allowed to be within their 4 amos where they went out, and you're not allowed to eat it outside of that space. You're not allowed to move them outside of that space. And even if they were brought back, unless they were brought back unintentionally. But if they were brought back intentionally, so somebody broke Shabbos by bringing it back, you're not allowed to benefit from it. Only if it was brought back unintentionally, but intentionally would be prohibited. So he said, Tanaihi. It's actually a machlokas. And we follow the opinion that's lenient. The Tani we learn, produce that were taken outside of the Tchum, and if it was done unintentionally, it can be eaten. Intentionally, it may not be eaten. So now we go to Mem Beis Amud Aleph. Today's daf from Nechemia Omer, to which Rabbi Nechemia says, Bimkoman yochelu. In their place, they can be eaten. Shelo bimkoman lo yochlu. Outside of their place, they may not be eaten. So now the Gemara is going to analyze it. So what do you mean in its place? It never left? Obviously, it can be eaten. Must be it left, and then it was brought back to its place, and he says it can be eaten. My bimkoma. What does it mean that it was in its place? Ilema bimkomam b'mezid. So what does it mean? He brought it back intentionally, breaking Shabbos to bring it back. So must be that we already know that Rabbi Nechemia says that if it was brought back intentionally, you may not eat it. As we saw in this brisa, that Rabbi Nechemia and Rabbi Eliezer both said, Rabbi Eliezer and Yaakov both said that if it was brought back intentionally, it's invalid. It's a transgression, and you're not allowed to benefit from it. You're not allowed to eat it. Shogigin, that it has to be brought back unintentionally. Shogigin only unintentionally, but not intentionally. So this produce having been brought back intentionally, for sure, Nechemi would say it's no good. Yet he says if it's in its place, you're allowed to eat it. Must be that it was brought back unintentionally. So must be that it was brought back unintentionally. And this is the way to read the brisa. The brisa is sort of shorthand, but really it's missing some of the context. And this is the way it should be read. Produce that was taken outside of the city, outside of its proper boundaries. B'shogeg, if it was taken out unintentionally, then it's allowed to be eaten even outside there. B'mezid, if it was taken out intentionally, lo yochli, you're not allowed to eat it. B'medvar mamurim shalibim komen. This is only if it's outside of its city, outside of its proper Shabbos place. Aval b'mkomen. But if it's somehow back in its original place, afilu b'mezid yochli, even if you brought it back, you can eat it. So the first opinion has two disagreements with Rabbi Nechemia. Number one, if you took it out of the city, took it out of the Tchum Shabbos, past 2,000 Amma, if you did it unintentionally, it's going to be permissible to be eaten. Intentionally, you're not allowed to eat it. If you brought it back in, even if you did so intentionally, you should not have done it. But the food's still permissible because this is its original place from Shabbos. On that, Rabbi Nechemia disagrees and he says, even in its own place, only if it came back unintentionally. But if it was brought back intentionally, you're not allowed to eat this produce, even in the place that it originally was at the onset of Shabbos. So the Gemara says, look, that's not the meaning. That's not the meaning of this brisa. But look, b'mezid, if it was done unintentionally, everybody would agree. Even if it's back, it's in original place, but it was done intentionally. Somebody carried this brought it back into its place where it wasn't allowed to be brought back because it was beyond 2,000 amma. It was supposed to remain there, and you brought it back. That's a transgression, and so it's going to be prohibited because it lost its Shabbos space at this point. So rather, the machlokas is only about the first part. Tanakama Savar, the first opinion says that even if you took it beyond the 2,000 amma, if it wasn't done intentionally, you can eat it there. And on that, Rabbi Nechemia says, no, you can't eat it there because it's outside of its place. It lost its Shabbos space, and you're not allowed to benefit from it. And to that, Rabbi Nechemia says, only in its place, but outside of its place, the onset of Shabbos sets the place for this produce, and you took it beyond, you're not allowed to eat it. But what about this that he says that if it was brought back, Rabbi Nechemia says that it's brought back unintentionally, then it's going to be okay. Meaning that if it was intentional, not shegegin b'mezid loy mechlal, and since we say that's what Rabbi Nechemia says, it would seem that the Chachamim disagree with that. The first opinion disagrees. Tanakama savar mezid hamishari shmamina. Indeed, that is the halacha. So we see that the Tanakama argues about two aspects. So taking it back to Rav Papa, we now have two opinions here. Rabbi Nechemia is strict on two ends. He says produce that was at the onset of Shabbos in Village A, and that was taken beyond 2,000 amma, outside of its space, it's going to be prohibited to be benefited from, regardless of whether it was taken intentionally or unintentionally. It's outside of its Shabbos space. It lost its Shabbos space. That's the first opinion. And on that, the Chachamim disagree. The Tanakhama disagree and say, no, not true. Since if it was taken out unintentionally, you can still eat that produce. That's halacha 1. 2, if it was brought back into town, regardless of, so if it was brought back unintentionally, so now it came back to its original Shabbos space, Rabbi Nechemia says it can be eaten, for sure. The Chachamim hold that. However, if it was brought back intentionally, which is a transgression, to that, Rabbi Nechemia says it lost its Shabbos space. It was outside of the Techum, and you cannot eat it here. It no longer is within its Shabbos space. You can't benefit from it. You can't eat it. To which the Chachamim say, no, regardless whether you brought it back intentionally or unintentionally, this is its Shabbos space. The produce is back in its Shabbos space. And as Rav Papa said, it didn't make a choice. It was forced back and forth, and therefore it maintains its halachic space, and it's permissible to be had here on Shabbos. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel. Rav Nachman said in the name of Shmuel, somebody doesn't know, he wants to leave the city, go for a walk. He doesn't know how far he's allowed to travel on Shabbos. How far is he allowed to go? So what does he do? So you take 2,000 proper steps, regular steps, beinonios, typical steps. A typical person walks about an amma a step, and therefore you could just take about 2,000 steps and assume that that is the correct space. Now, as you remember, we talked about that there's a machlokas of whether the concept of Techum Shabbos, that the boundary, the beyond which you're not allowed to go, is a Torah prohibition or rabbinic prohibition. But either way, whether it's a Torah prohibition or rabbinic prohibition, the number 2,000 amma outside of a city is for sure rabbinic. And therefore, if it was a Torah prohibition, you couldn't just estimate or guesstimate based on your steps. But since it's a rabbinic prohibition, the Chachamim said you can approximate and take these 2,000 steps, and that's going to be sufficient. Furthermore, Rav Nachman said another halacha in the name of Shmuel. Shavas bebika. And here we're going to have an interesting halacha. Somebody was out in the plains, and he made himself a Shabbos space. He had a little meal, and this is where he was for Shabbos on the retreat, or whatever it was, right? And now Shabbos morning comes, and a group of workers come and say, we have a contract to put up a fence around this area because it's going to become a a ranch. It's going to become someone's house, or we're building a complex, whatever. So they build this fence around him on Shabbos with the intent of this enclosed space to be a dwelling space, either for an individual, for a group of people, whatever it is, but it was for the intent of a dwelling. They enclosed this area. So now, we talked about earlier that the place, if you were in a city, it counts as 4 amos. Now, this person who had, at the onset of Shabbos, had chosen this place to dwell in for Shabbos, he can only travel 4 amos is his space, and he can go 2,000 amma from there, and that's it. But now, they just enclosed it for dwelling, so perhaps the entire space counts as his 4 amos, just like the entirety of Portland counts as 4 amos. And you can walk from one end to the other, even beyond the 2,000 amma. Shavas bebika v'kifur nachram mechitza b'Shabbos mahalach apayim amma. So he says, Shmuel says, you can only walk 2,000 amma, the original amount you were allowed to walk. However, since you're now inside an Eruv, it's an enclosed space, matalte b'kula, you can carry throughout the whole thing. Now, obviously, you can't carry beyond 2,000 amma because you can't go beyond 2,000 amma. So what does that mean? You can throw. So you're allowed to play ball in there, or whatever it is, or you're going to throw something. There's no prohibition of carrying in that space because it's all enclosed, so you can throw things even beyond the 2,000 amma. However, even though Shmuel said this, Rav Huna, who was essentially a student colleague of Shmuel, says, Rav Huna Amar Mahalich Alpayim Amma, he can travel the 2,000 amma, but he can only carry Taltal Dalat Amos. Can only carry the 4 amos because the space was not enclosed at the onset of Shabbos. So the carrying, the walls that were made on Shabbos he cannot carry. Now we'll see soon the reason for this. The Gemara says, why can't he carry on Shabbos? After all, it's enclosed right now. It has walls around it. Rika, let him throw things like we saw before. So the Gemara says, the problem is, if he's going to carry this and then throw it beyond the 2,000 amma, which he's allowed to do, technically, he may go to fetch it beyond the 2,000 amma, thinking, look, if I can carry here because it's enclosed, I can walk here because it's enclosed, and he's actually not allowed to. The original limit, and because, as you remember, we talked about many times, the onset of Shabbos is what defines your Shabbos space. And so at the onset of Shabbos, he had a max of 2,000 amma, so he's not allowed to carry beyond that. He's not allowed to walk beyond that. And if he will carry beyond that, meaning he throws something, he may go get it, and that would break his 2,000 amma limit. So Gemara says, so let him at least carry the 2,000 amma. So he said, no. There's another halacha we learned, that if you have an enclosed area that you're allowed to carry in, and then you have an enclosed area that you're not allowed to carry in, and the wall between those two areas completely breaks down, the area you're allowed to carry in is completely open to the area you're not allowed to carry in, you're not allowed to carry in either. So same over here. You have 2,000 amma that you're allowed to carry in. Beyond that 2,000 amma, you're not allowed to carry, but there's no fence, there's no wall between the two. So therefore, it's a problem. So it's it's like a wall that's completely breached to a place that's prohibited to carry it. However, now the Gemara says, Chia, in the name of the son of Rav, he says, actually, not like Shmuel, who says you can travel 2,000 amma and throw and carry beyond the 2,000 amma, and not like Rav Huna, who says you can travel to 2,000 amma, but you can't carry at all, only the 4 ammas. He says, actually, you can travel 2,000 amma and carry 2,000 amma. You can't throw beyond, and you're not limited to the 4 ammas. Come on. So whose opinion is this? The look of Rav Nachman, the look of Rav Huna. Not like Rav Nachman, not like Rav Huna. So Gemara says, so maybe what it means is that you can carry within the 4. Well, then he's just repeating Rav Huna's opinion. Maybe what the text should read is, Similarly, so too did Rav, just like Rav Huna, so too Rav Chia bar Rav say. Amle Rav Nachman Rav Huna. Rav Nachman said to Rav Huna, "Tifle galei Shmuel." Don't disagree with the Shmuel. In other words, with my opinion of what Shmuel said. The Tanakh of us say, because we have a brisa that concurs with him. The Tanakh we learned. And now we go to Mem Amid Beis, 42b. Somebody is measuring his 2,000 amas. So the onset of Shabbos, it got dark quickly. It was getting dark. He didn't know what to do. He put down a meal. He said, all right, this is where I am for Shabbos. Shabbos morning comes, the sun goes up. He says, okay, let me start counting and see where I can get in 2,000 amma. Maybe I'm close to a city or a village or something. So he gets up, he starts counting 2,000 amma, and he sees, what do you know? There's a town right here. And he walks in, and his 2,000 amma ends somewhere in the midst of a town. Because if it doesn't be chatziyah, somewhere in the middle of the city. The Brisa says he can carry the entire city. Because as if you remember, we talked about that when you, at the onset of Shabbos, you have the space you're in counts as 4 amas. But over here, this wasn't his space at the onset of Shabbos. So the entire city is not going to count as 4 amos for him, so he can't walk the rest of the city. However, to carry, since he's inside a city, and the city has boundaries, walls, he can carry within the city. Or if it's Yantiv, so he's allowed to carry in the city, but he's not allowed to carry, he's not allowed to go beyond the 2,000 amma. But he can't walk past the 2,000 amma, but he can carry, so he can throw it to someone. So Gemara says, isn't it by throwing? So you see, this is a brisa exactly like Shmuel, that he can throw his items beyond 2,000 amma, and we're not concerned that he may go to fetch it. Amar Rav Huna, to which Rav Huna says, no, that's not proof. When that brisa says that he can carry beyond the 2,000 amma, it means something else. That he can bring something back to him. He can use a stick and schlep something that's beyond the limit of where he is. He's only allowed to go to 2,000 amma, and 2,008 amma away, there's an item he wants. He's going to take an 8 amma stick, lean out there, and schlep it in with that. The way he's bringing it back, he's going to bring it back, and that's what it means that he's allowed to do it. Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, based on this halacha also, similar to this halacha, he counts, he's counting the 2,000 amma, and he gets into the middle of a courtyard. Not into the middle of the city, but actually into an enclosed courtyard. There are houses there, and he's in the middle of a courtyard. He can only carry within that, it can only travel into half the courtyard. So when it says, of course, pshita. Why would he be able to go beyond that? What it means is he actually can carry into half the courtyard. So Gemara says, Hanami pshita. And that's obvious as well. He's allowed to walk into the courtyard. Why not? So Gemara says, because if he's allowed to carry into half the courtyard, maybe he's going to carry beyond that. Kamash Malan. Therefore, it says that actually he's allowed to carry into part of the courtyard, but not beyond. Amar Rav Nachman. So we have a machlokas between Rav Nachman and Rav Huna. In Rav Nachman, in the name of Shmuel, says that somebody that came to an enclosure can, or either somebody built a wall around him on Shabbos, or he got into a city. So then he's allowed to walk the 2,000 amma and carry beyond the 2,000 amma. And Rav Huna says, no, he's not allowed to carry, but he is allowed to travel the 2,000 amma. Amar Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman said, Moiduli Huna, Rav Huna would agree to me, that he counted the 2,000 amma, and he got straight up to the outer wall of a house. But there's a ledge over it. He can carry in the entirety of the house. Even though he's not allowed to walk into the house, but he's allowed to carry in the house itself. Why? My time. Because the wall of the house reminds him, this is my boundary. So there's a very visible, clear boundary. So even though there's a breach in the wall or a doorway, whatever it is, he's allowed to throw stuff into the house, even though he can't walk into the house because it's beyond his 2,000 amma. But he can throw the things in because we're not concerned that he's going to walk in and carry because that's a clear boundary for it. Amar Avuna Bereder of Nasan Katanai. There's a machlokas tanaim, and this would fit with that machlokas. In our Mishnah, it said, people kidnapped someone on Shabbos. He was in town A, and that was his Shabbos space, and they took him beyond the 2,000 amma, and they put him in another city, another village, or they put him inside a barn, or they put him inside a fenced-in area, or in a prison. So Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah say you can walk around the whole prison, the whole fenced-in area, the whole barn, the whole city, because you know what? It's an enclosed area, so that counts as 4 amos. Even though you're beyond your own Shabbos space, more than 2,000 amma, but you're now in a self-contained space, it all counts as 4 amma, and you're allowed to walk the entirety of that space. However, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Kiva say, now, since at the onset of Shabbos you were in a different city, so this enclosure is not your Shabbos space, and so you're not allowed to walk more than 4 amos. And even though usually we say an enclosure like that counts as 4 amos, but it doesn't count as your 4 amos because for you were in a different city at the onset of Shabbos. At the onset of Shabbos, this wasn't your space. My love, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, the reason, wouldn't you say that the reason Rabbi Gamliel says you can walk through the entirety of the space, because they say, look, true, you're in a fenced-in area, but we're not concerned. Maybe if you walk in a fenced-in area, you're going to come to walk in an unfenced-in area. We're not concerned about that. So, if they're not concerned about walking in a fenced-in area for a non-fenced-in area, the same, they would say you're allowed to carry beyond the 2,000 amma, you're allowed to throw something beyond the 2,000 amma, because we're not concerned beyond the 2,000 for the space itself. Also, so they're not concerned you're going to walk past the 2,000 amma to fetch your item. However, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yeshua say that you're not allowed to go beyond the 4 amos, must be, at the Gemara at this point thinks it's not the reason I told you before that it's not their city from the onset of Shabbos, but rather the reason is it's a concern that maybe if you walk in an enclosed area, you're going to end up walking in a non-enclosed area, and you're not allowed to because you're outside of your boundaries. And the Gazer Hilach Devasar, Auto Hilach Debika, because they say if you're going to walk in an enclosed area, you're going to end up walking in a non-enclosed area. And since if they're concerned about walking in an enclosed area on account of that, maybe you're going to end walking in a non-enclosed. So so then they should prohibit as well and say that you're not allowed to carry, even though you're allowed to you're in an enclosed area, because maybe you're going to carry beyond the 2,000 amma, and then you're going to try and fetch it, and you're going to walk past the space. So Gemara says, no comparison. How can you say the memai? Why would you say this in a comparison? Dilma, perhaps. Kila goes at Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, Rabbi Kiva, and Rabbi Gamliel say that we're not concerned about your walking in a enclosed area. Hilach sarvadir, auto hilach bika, and therefore we're not concerned that you may walk in an unclosed area as well. Hani Mili, House of the Shem over there are 2 different places. One's enclosed, one's not enclosed. Aval tiltul at hilach, but by the carrying, the concern is in the space you're in. Now you're not allowed to carry beyond the 2,000. You're not allowed to walk beyond the 2,000 amma. And if you can carry them, meaning you can throw something, you may go to fetch it. So it's in the same place itself. The makim echaru, it's in one place. Maybe even Rabbi Gamliel would agree, and Rabbi Eliezer would agree, you're not allowed to carry because you would end up going beyond the 2,000 hours. Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Kiva, Nami, and even Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Kiva, who said that you're not allowed to walk in the enclosed area that you were forced into outside of your city. Memai, the Mashum the Gazri. Who tells you the reason is because they were concerned that maybe you're going to carry in an unenclosed area. Dilma Mishum the Kasavri. Maybe the main reason is, as we explained earlier, Ki Amrina Kalabayas Kulak Arba Amas. When do we say the entire house counts as 4 amma space, or even an entire city counts as 4 amma space? When do we say that? At the onset of Shabbos, he was in this enclosure. He was in this city. He was in this town. He was in this house. He was in this courtyard. He was in this enclosure. And that's why at the onset of Shabbos, this is your space, and it all counts as 4 amos, your space. But if you were moved, even against your will, but you were moved to another town, another enclosure, that at the onset of Shabbos was not your space, and it doesn't count as 4 amos. It counts as its real dimensions. But if at the onset of Shabbos you were not inside this enclosure, look, it wouldn't say this. Amar Rav, so Rav says the halach is like a Rabbi Gamliel. Bedir, Basar, Usfina. In a fenced-in enclosure, in a prison, in a boat, the halach is like him regardless. Any enclosure counts as 4 amos, even if you were forced there, even if at the onset of Shabbos you were not in it. Shmuel says the halach is only like a Rabbi Gamliel in regards to a boat, but in regards to being forced into a prison or into a fenced-in area beyond your 2,000 amma, that wouldn't count as your space, and therefore you only have 4 amos. You can't walk the entirety. The kula alma mia silchas Rabbi Gamliel basfina. But everybody says the halach is like a Rabbi Gamliel by a boat that you can walk the entirety of the boat, even if it's beyond 4,000 4 amos, even though that it's beyond 2,000 amma of where it started at Shabbos. My time. So what's the reason? Amar Rabba. Rabba says because at the onset of Shabbos you're in the boat, and therefore that enclosure of the boat walls are going to count as your space. However, Rabbi Zera says no. The reason is something else. It's because the boat constantly, as you take a step in the boat, since the boat itself is also moving, so you lifted your foot to take a step within 4 amma space, but by the time you put your foot down, you're in a new 4 amma space. It's constantly creating a new 4 amma space for you because as the boat moves, you relative to the boat, you just took 1 step. But relative to the water, relative to the ground, relative to earth, you're taking a step way beyond the 4 amos, and therefore it doesn't count as a 4 amma space. Wherever you are, it's 4 amos is constantly changing and moving. Rashi has various interpretations of Rabbi Zera's of this meaning of Rabbi Zera that the boat moves your 4 amos. But either way, we went with the last one, which is one Rashi says is Iker is the main interpretation. Tomorrow morning we'll see that there's what the difference between these interpretations and very halachic ramifications of being in a boat on Shabbos and walking